I was sentenced to life in prison. One phone call changed everything for me. I remember that night like it happened yesterday. I wasn't doing anything unusual, just my usual walk home after a late shift at the cafe. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet. My headphones were on, music humming softly in my ears, and I was thinking about nothing in particular. Just wanting to get home and rest. I didn't notice the way the streetlights flickered ahead. Didn't notice the car slowing down behind me. I didn't even notice at first that someone was following me. It was only when my phone buzzed in my pocket that I looked up. A shadow shifted under a street lamp. My heart skipped. I kept walking, but then the footsteps behind me slowed. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see no words, no explanation, just a man in a dark jacket watching me. My stomach tightened. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. I walked faster. My breath was sharper now. My phone buzzed again. It was an unknown number. I thought about ignoring it, but something inside me told me to answer. I picked up. "Mia, we know what happened. We know what they did." The voice was calm, almost too calm. Then the line went dead. I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. Who were they? What had they done? I stepped onto my porch and closed the door behind me, locking it twice. My hands were shaking. I put the phone down, but I couldn't stop thinking about that call. I told myself it was a prank, but the voice stayed with me. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The next morning, I woke to something strange. My mailbox was stuffed with envelopes I didn't recognize. I opened them slowly, hands trembling. Inside were papers, legal documents, photographs, strange letters. I didn't understand what they were at first. Then I noticed the handwriting, neat but urgent. "You have to know the truth. They're coming for you." At first I thought it was a sick joke, but soon it became impossible to ignore. Strange things started happening. My apartment door wasn't as I left it. I found footprints in the dust on my windowsill. At night, I heard noises, soft at first, but growing louder. And then there was the knock. Quiet at first, then harder, like someone demanding to be heard. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, but then came the call that changed everything. I was summoned to court. I didn't know why. No one told me. The summons just said I needed to appear immediately. My heart sank as I read it. What could this be about? The courtroom was cold, the air heavy. I remember standing there, the sound of my own breathing filling the silence. The judge looked at me without expression, his voice flat as he said the words I'd never forget: life imprisonment. I didn't understand. I had done nothing wrong. Not something so terrible to deserve this. But I didn't get to explain. The walls seemed to close in. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them they had the wrong person. But my voice caught, and then I noticed it. The way people looked at me, not with pity but with suspicion. Whispers followed me everywhere. Friends stopped returning my calls. Doors closed when I walked past. This wasn't about the trial anymore. This was about something deeper. Something in the system that wanted me silenced. The days in prison were the hardest. Every night, the walls felt closer. Every sound became louder. Every shadow looked like a threat. I clung to memories of my family, my freedom, the life I had before all this. Letters came from strangers who believed me, offering hope. But even hope felt fragile. Then the phone rang again. Late at night, I was in my cell, alone. The ringing echoed through the cold air. I answered. The voice was urgent, breathless. "You have no idea what's at stake. You have to fight. There's a way, but it won't be easy." And then, silence. My mind raced. What did they mean? Who were they? Why me? The fear I felt was real, but so was the strange spark of hope that began to burn inside me. I realized my life wasn't mine anymore. Something was unfolding. Something dangerous. Something that would change everything. That night, I lay on the hard bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what was coming next. My life had been pulled apart, piece by piece. But somehow, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. And somewhere deep inside me, I knew the story was far from finished. I woke the next morning to the sound of distant footsteps echoing through the prison hall. The air was thick, heavy, and somehow quieter than usual, like the world was holding its breath. I lay in my cot, my head resting against the thin pillow, thinking about that call. Who was on the other side? Why had they called me now, in the middle of all this chaos? It felt strange, like I was caught in a story I didn't understand, one I had no control over. Every cell around me was filled with people with their own stories, their own pains, but I felt my story was somehow different. Mine wasn't just about survival. It was about something bigger, something that wasn't just me. By mid-morning, the tension in the air became almost unbearable. Prison life was never quiet. But today it felt loaded. The guards moved differently, their eyes sharper, their voices clipped. I tried to ask one of them why, but they just shook their head and walked away. No answers. Just silence. I spent that day talking quietly with another inmate, someone who had been here for years. Her name was Rosa. She told me stories about the walls, about how prison changes people, how it teaches fear more than anything else. But she also said something that stayed with me. Sometimes, the truth is worth more than freedom. Her words kept spinning in my head. Truth. That was the thing I clung to. If I could prove my innocence, if I could get the truth out, maybe this nightmare could end. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be simple. The system wasn't built to make things right. It was built to control, to silence voices like mine. The days passed slowly, painfully. I spent hours reading the letters that kept arriving. Some were encouragement, others warnings. One letter had no name, no return address, just words scribbled in uneven ink. They are watching. You are not safe. Fight. My hands shook when I read it. I couldn't stop wondering who knew, who was behind this. Then one evening, as the lights dimmed and the prison settled into its routine silence, something happened. A guard came to my cell. He didn't speak at first, just stood there looking at me. His eyes were not angry, not indifferent. They were serious. Finally, he said quietly, "You need to be ready. Tomorrow." And then he walked away. I didn't know what he meant. Ready for what? My heart pounded through the night. I barely slept, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the fear and the hope mixing inside me. The next day came fast. I was taken to a different room, a part of the prison I hadn't seen before. It was colder there, the air sharper. There was a table, a single chair, and a man waiting. He didn't introduce himself, he just handed me a file. Inside were documents, photos, court transcripts, my life laid bare on paper. One photo caught my breath. It was of me taken years ago, in a place I barely remembered. But why was it here? Why now? As I flipped through the documents, I realized they weren't just about my case. They were about something much larger, something I couldn't yet understand. The man spoke then, his voice low. "There's more to your case than you know. They didn't just want to put you away. They wanted to erase you. But there is a way to fight back." His words were sharp, but there was urgency too. "You have to be careful. They're watching everyone who's close to you." I felt my breath catch. Who was they? And why me? My mind was spinning, my chest tight. I wanted to ask questions, so many, but my voice felt stuck. Instead, I nodded, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I was led back to my cell, my hands clutching the file. I lay there for hours, flipping through pages over and over. Every word felt heavier than the last. I wasn't just a prisoner anymore. I was a part of something dangerous, something that could change everything if it came to light. That night, I lay awake thinking about the phone call, the guard's warning, the man in the cold room. Everything was coming together, but the picture was still blurry. And deep down, I knew it was going to get worse before it got better. The next morning, the news came. My trial was being reopened. No explanation, no warning. Just an order. I felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear because I knew reopening it meant more scrutiny. Relief because maybe, just maybe, this was my chance. But my relief was short-lived. I heard whispers in the hallways, rumors that this wasn't about proving my innocence. It was about controlling me, about sending a message. I felt the walls closing in again. But this time, something was different. I wasn't willing to just let it happen. I made a decision that day. I wasn't going to wait for them to decide my fate. I was going to fight. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I had to try. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth, about justice, and about not letting fear win. That night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, the file still clutched in my hands. Somewhere deep inside, a fire had begun to burn, a fire that wouldn't let me rest until I uncovered the whole story. And I knew, without a doubt, that the fight was just beginning. The day after they told me my trial was being reopened, the prison felt different. The air itself seemed heavier, as if something unseen had settled over the walls. I could feel eyes on me everywhere I went. Other inmates, guards, even the silence between footsteps. Every glance felt loaded, like they were all waiting for something to happen. And so was I. That morning, I was called to the same cold room again. The guard said nothing, just opened the heavy door and gestured for me to enter. The man was there again, waiting. His face was unreadable, but his eyes seemed sharper now, as if he had been expecting me. Without a word, he pushed the file toward me and closed the door. I opened it slowly, as though every page might hold a piece of my freedom. But it wasn't just freedom. It was the weight of my entire life being stripped apart, rewritten, controlled. There were notes in the margins, photographs I had never seen, records that didn't add up. Somewhere in the shadows of those papers was the truth, something someone was desperate to hide. I spent hours in that room that day, reading every detail over and over. My hands shook, my throat tightened. There was something almost unreal about it, like I was reading a story I had lived, but the words were written by someone else. Someone who wanted to change the ending. When they finally let me go back to my cell, I felt the walls closing in even more. Rosa was there, her eyes meeting mine with a quiet knowing. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I could tell she had seen this kind of thing before, the slow, suffocating build of something dangerous. That night, I barely slept. I kept turning over the file in my mind. There was a pattern, something hiding in plain sight. And then I remembered the letter I had received days earlier. The words kept coming back to me. They are watching. You are not safe. Fight. It wasn't just advice anymore. It was a warning. And I realized something terrifying. If I wanted to fight, I couldn't do it from inside these walls. I needed to find a way out. The next morning, they brought me before a judge I had never met. The courtroom was cold, the air heavy with whispers. I felt my heart pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. The judge's eyes scanned me like a final verdict already decided. Then the hearing began. The lawyers spoke in clipped tones, throwing around words that sounded like they belonged to another world. But I wasn't listening to them. I was watching every face, every movement, every pause. I was trying to find the cracks in the armor of their story, and I knew they were there. Somewhere. But then, the judge leaned forward and spoke in a way that froze me completely. This case is complicated, but there are factors that must be considered outside of the court. We will reconvene. It wasn't a ruling, it was a delay. And I knew delays in this world often meant more danger. Back in my cell, the whispers were louder. Inmates talked quietly in corners. Guards moved past with more suspicion than usual. Rosa didn't say anything. She just handed me a scrap of paper. No words, just a number and a name. It was a lead. a thread, a chance to unravel the whole thing. That night, I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide what to do. The decision was terrifying. If I followed the thread, I risked everything. But if I stayed silent, I risked losing myself, my freedom, my truth. I thought about the day before, about the man in the cold room, about the file that had been forced into my hands. I thought about my life before all this. Ordinary days, simple dreams. And I realized I couldn't go back to that. Not now. Something inside me shifted. I made up my mind. I would follow that thread. Even if it meant stepping into danger. Even if it meant everything could be taken from me. Because I couldn't stop now. The next morning, a guard appeared at my cell and said, "You have a visitor." I didn't expect anyone. When the door opened, a woman stepped in. Her eyes were sharp, guarded. She introduced herself quietly. "Alik, we don't have much time. What you're about to see will change everything." She handed me an envelope. It was thick, heavy. My name was written on the front in careful handwriting. Inside were photos, documents, recordings, pieces of a puzzle I had been blind to. And then she said the words that would stay in my mind forever. "This isn't just your fight anymore. It's something much bigger, and they know you're ready to take it on." I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't fear, it was resolve. I didn't know what lay ahead. I only knew one thing. I was no longer just a prisoner. I was a fighter, and the walls of this place would not keep me silent. When she left my cell, the air felt heavier than before. The envelope was clutched in my hands, its weight somehow heavier than the papers inside. I didn't open it right away. I just sat on my cot and stared at the cold walls around me, trying to steady my racing thoughts. Every breath felt like it was pulled from somewhere deep, somewhere afraid yet unwilling to back down. I remembered the first time I'd been led into a courtroom, shackled and silent, wondering if anyone out there would even hear my voice. And now here I was, holding something that could change everything. My life, my truth, maybe even the system that had held me captive. I tore the envelope open slowly, as if the sound itself would make something break. Inside were photographs, grainy, dark, showing faces I recognized and names I didn't. There were documents, handwritten notes, a few voice recordings on a small USB stick. Each piece was a thread leading somewhere deeper, somewhere dangerous. My mind spun. Every page felt like a map into something I wasn't sure I wanted to find. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not after everything. Later that day, Rosa came to my side while the others were in the mess hall. She didn't speak at first. She just watched me, as if she could see into the chaos in my head. Then she said softly, "They've been waiting for you to make a move. This isn't just about proving innocence anymore, Alec. It's about survival." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I fully understood. What did survival mean when you were already locked behind walls? Was it freedom? Or something deeper, something you carried in your soul? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My mind wouldn't rest. I kept hearing her words. "They've been waiting." What did that mean? Who was waiting? And for what? Sleep finally came in short bursts, filled with dreams that felt too real. I dreamt of voices whispering my name, of locked doors opening just enough to see light, and of footsteps echoing down corridors I didn't recognize. When I woke, I felt more certain than ever I had to act. The next morning, I requested to see the warden. It was bold, maybe reckless, but I needed answers. I told the guard it's urgent. His eyes narrowed, and he nodded without a word. That small nod felt heavier than a sentence. In the warden's office, the air was thick with silence. He looked at me for longer than necessary, like weighing me against some invisible scale. Finally, he said, "Alik, what you have there, it's dangerous. You don't know what you're getting into." I met his gaze steadily. "I know exactly what I'm getting into. And I can't stop now," he sighed, leaning back. "There are forces at play you can't see. If you open that envelope, if you follow that trail, there will be consequences. I nodded again. Then I'll take them. Walking back to my cell, every step felt like a beat closer to something irreversible. Rosa was waiting. She didn't ask questions. She just slid the envelope toward me. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't a choice anymore. That afternoon, I opened every single file, every photograph, every recording. It was worse than I imagined. There were names, dates, transactions. There were people in power who had built their walls of influence on secrets and silence. And somewhere in those papers was proof that my story, my imprisonment, wasn't about guilt. It was about control. I felt anger rise inside me, sharp and hot, like fire against ice. But there was also fear. Fear that if they found out I had this, they wouldn't stop until it was gone. Until I was gone. I thought about the life I once had. Quiet, safe, ordinary. That life was gone. And in its place was something I couldn't ignore. A fight that was no longer just mine. By nightfall, the whispers in the prison had changed. They weren't just about the weather or the guards anymore. They were about me. People began to look differently when I passed. Some with curiosity, some with fear. But there was something else too. Respect. Or maybe it was warning. That night I made my decision. I would take the risk. I would follow the thread, wherever it led. Because if I didn't, I knew I would never forgive myself. I slid the envelope under my pillow and lay awake, listening to the distant hum of the prison at night. Somewhere beyond those walls, someone was watching, waiting. And I wasn't sure if they wanted me to stop, or to find the truth. The next day, I was called to another hearing. This time, the atmosphere felt different. The judge's face was harder, the lawyers more cautious. But I noticed something. The moment I walked in, the eyes in the room seemed sharper, more focused on me than ever. And then, as I sat down, I heard those words again in my mind. They are watching. It was no longer a warning. It was a challenge, and I was ready to answer. The morning of the hearing felt heavier than any day before. I woke up before the sun, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake the whole prison. Rosa was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. I didn't need words. I knew she felt it too. The tension in the air, the knowledge that everything could change today. I slipped the envelope from under my pillow and tucked it carefully inside my jacket. It felt heavier now, not just in weight, but in meaning. It was proof, evidence of something far bigger than me, something dangerous. Yet holding it made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. When the guards led me out, whispers followed me down the corridor. Every step sounded louder in my ears. My palms were sweaty, but I clenched my fists until they ached. I wasn't just walking into a hearing, I was walking into the heart of everything that had kept me locked away. The courtroom was packed. The air inside smelled of stale coffee, paper, and something metallic. I took a seat, trying to steady myself, while the judge looked at me with a mixture of impatience and curiosity. The prosecutor glanced toward me once, then away. It was a quiet battlefield, but I knew the war was about to start. When they called my name, my legs felt like lead. I stood slowly, clutching the papers in my jacket. Every eye in the room was on me, waiting. Waiting for me to speak, to break, to confirm what they already believed. But I wasn't there to beg. I was there to reveal. I began to speak. My voice was steady at first, but as I went deeper, it cracked. The weight of years, of silence, of injustice pressing down on me. I told them about the photographs, the recordings, the hidden truths. I told them how my life had been stolen, how my freedom was taken not because of guilt, but because of fear. Fear of exposure, fear of you losing control. Gasps echoed quietly through the courtroom. Faces turned pale. Somewhere in the back, I thought I saw the judge lean forward. Eyes narrowing. The air grew thicker with every word. Then the prosecutor stood, trying to interrupt, but the judge shook his head. Something in my voice, or maybe in the evidence, had shifted the room. For the first time, it felt like people were listening. Really listening. The room fell silent when I finished. My chest burned, my knees weak. I had laid everything bare, and now it was out of my hands. The judge looked at me long and hard, then nodded slowly, as if weighing not just my words but the truth they carried. When I was led back to my cell, the hallway felt different. Whispers were louder now, and the looks weren't just curious. They were charged. Something had shifted. I knew it. That night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the prison. The creak of doors, the muffled voices, the distant clang of metal. Somewhere deep inside me, fear still lived. But so did something stronger, hope. For the first time in years, I felt hope. In the days that followed, the case grew. People started talking outside these walls. There were news articles, small protests, voices rising for me. But inside, the pressure only grew. Guards were watching me closer. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Then came the call. The one I had been waiting for without knowing it. My lawyer appeared at my cell door. Her face unreadable, but her eyes intense. She handed me a single sheet of paper. No words, no explanations, just the paper. It was the judge's decision. My sentence had been overturned. I was free. I didn't cry. Not immediately. I just stood there, staring at the paper, my heart pounding in disbelief. The walls around me seemed to shrink, the air suddenly lighter. Then the tears came. Slow at first, then unstoppable. Relief, fear, anger, and joy all spilling out at once. When I stepped out of those gates, the sunlight was blinding. I blinked hard, letting the light wash over me. Rosa was waiting, a smile breaking across her face. She didn't say a word. She just held out her hand, and I took it. But as I walked away from the prison, I knew my story wasn't over. It had become something bigger. A reminder that injustice could hide behind walls, behind silence, behind fear. But truth could break them down. And now I had a choice, to stay silent and live, or to speak and change something. I chose to speak. Because if my story taught me anything, it was that silence was the real prison. I turned to Rosa and said, "This isn't just my freedom, it's everyone's." And as we walked away, I knew the fight was only beginning.